While attacking the Umbrella Corporation, Alice finds a group of survivors in an abandoned prison and will have to face the evil executioner and the sewer-crawling zombies to save her new group. Today we're going to recap the story of the movie, Resident Evil 4, Afterlife, from 2010. After an accident at the Umbrella Laboratories, a virus spread across the planet and wiped out most of humanity. But unluckily for the survivors, none of the bodies remained down for long, triggering a zombie apocalypse. Even after the global destruction, Umbrella has hidden underground in Tokyo and continues to experiment with the T-virus, but Alice, a former employee, is willing to do anything to stop the operation. Outside, two watchmen are eliminating the zombies approaching Umbrella when they are neutralized without even realizing it. In the command center underground, the operators realize that all the external sentries have been eliminated and notify President Wesker, leaving him in a state of alert. Wanting information about the invader, he asks to speak to the watchman at the surface gate and sees the exact moment when the soldier is eliminated. With the invasion confirmed, Wesker sends his men to wait for the target to arrive by elevator, but they end up being surprised by Alice, who comes down the ventilation shaft, causing most of them to be eliminated without even seeing what hit them. Using two katanas, the woman removes the heads of some soldiers and pierces the abdomens of others. After almost 20 casualties, the remaining men finally realize that they are armed and start shooting at Alice, forcing the woman to hide behind the pillar and use one of their weapons against the members of the corporation themselves. With only one soldier left, the woman jumps over the wall to dodge the bullets and takes advantage of him reloading to finish the fight, throwing the katana through his skull. Just then, a second platoon arrives and Alice manages to finish them all off with her telekinetic powers, throwing them far away and completely destroying the place, but she ends up being taken by surprise by a soldier who shoots her in the back. Thinking they've won, the men gather around the body to celebrate when they end up being surprised by 3 other clones who shoot them all. Watching everything on camera, Wesker orders the operators to activate the security protocols. But even with his private army, he is unable to defeat Alice and her copies, who are getting closer and closer to the plant. Clinging to the roof of the building, 2 clones abseil down several floors while eliminating everyone along the way. After a bloody descent, the woman arrives in the room where Wesker is and begins an intense exchange of fire where she ends up being shot by the villain, but this Alice was just a clone full of grenades that explode as soon as they hit the ground. Genetically modified, the president of Umbrella manages to survive the impact and decides to flee before it's too late, boarding one of the company's jets. As soon as he's far enough away, Wesker grabs his personal controller and begins to self-destruct the building, blowing everything up with a giant explosion that opens a crater in the center of Tokyo. Inside the jet, the real Alice slowly approaches and points a gun at the boss's head, but he has already realized her presence and manages to stick a syringe into the woman's neck without her noticing, injecting a serum capable of neutralizing all the T-cells in her body. Alice loses all her powers and now has no chance of winning the fight against Wesker, but she manages to make the villain forget to fly the jet and they end up crashing into a mountain, consumed by an intense fireball. But even without her powers, Alice manages to survive and walks completely aimlessly. 6 months later, the woman is still hunting Umbrella members when she receives a radio message about Arcadia, a town on the Alaskan coast that is offering shelter to all survivors. Curious, Alice flies to the coordinates and, unable to find the town, decides to return to the airstrip. As soon as she arrives, she realizes that something is wrong and starts walking until she finds an abandoned helicopter in the middle of the beach. While searching the vehicle, Alice notices a movement behind her and decides to follow the tracks back to the lane, coming across a stranger who begins to confront her. After a brief battle, she manages to knock out the invader and discovers that it is Claire Redfield, an old friend who was taken by Umbrella some time ago. With the girl unconscious, Alice ties her to the plane's landing gear and waits for her to wake up to ask what happened during that time. But Claire has lost her memory and is very disoriented, refusing to answer. Not knowing if she can trust her, Alice ties her friend up and together they cross Canada until they reach Los Angeles. While flying over the city, the two are spotted by a group of survivors who start asking for help, but as they are in a prison surrounded by the zombies, they don't have anywhere to land the plane and Alice decides to stop on the terrace. Realizing her intention, the survivors remove obstacles along the way and manage to improvise a small track, as well as placing some cables in the middle of the path to help with braking. On the extremely narrow path, Alice manages to touch the ground and does everything she can to stop the aircraft, but the building is too short and she almost plummets into the zombies, forcing the survivors to jump on top of the plane to prevent them from falling. After landing, Alice introduces herself to the group, who ask if they are from Arcadia, and are disappointed to discover that they are just survivors looking for a safe place. Curious, the woman asks what they know about the city and Luther replies that they have been receiving warnings all week, but that contrary to what they imagine, Arcadia is not a place but a ship, and they can see it from inside the prison. Luther then shows her the last message they received, and Alice realizes that it is the same one she heard, which means that the ship has come down the coast looking for survivors. Continuing the message, the woman realizes that the sound has suddenly stopped, and Luther reveals that it was 2 days ago, and that since then, the ship hasn't moved or sent any more radio signals. With no way out, Luther decides to take a tour of the Citadel prison and introduces Alice to the other survivors, including Chris, a man who is being held prisoner in the maximum security block. On spotting Luther, the man on watch says he heard something behind the walls, and the two of them go there to investigate, leaving Alice alone with the imprisoned man. Chris then introduces himself and says that he was a member of a platoon that used the Citadel as a hangar, but that after the prisoners were released by the governor, a group of criminals mistook him for a jailer and locked him in the cage. He remained so even after the survivors arrived. Finally, Chris says he knows a way to escape from the prison and asks Alice to get him out of there, but Luther returns and interrupts their conversation, taking the newcomer back to the cafeteria where she is servicing the weapons. In the maximum security block, the watchman keeps hearing strange noises and decides to ignore it, thinking it's all in his head, but unbeknownst to him, the zombies are digging underground and manage to get in through the bathroom drain. In addition to the ordinary zombies, another type of biological weapon known as an executioner senses the presence of the humans and approaches with its gigantic axe. With no idea of the chaos to come, Alice wakes up the next morning and goes to the bathroom to take her first shower in weeks, but before she even takes off her clothes, she starts to hear strange sounds and grabs her gun to investigate. Following the direction of the noise, Alice discovers that the watchman was trying to spy on her and decides to expel the man, but ends up being surprised by a zombie on her back. The woman then turns around and manages to land a headshot that blows the zombie's brains out, but while she's shooting at everything in sight, one of the creatures manages to capture the watchman and drags him into the sewer. After the attack, the survivors meet to decide what to do, and Bennett suggests that Alice take them to Arcadia, but as her plane only fits 2 people, she says that she would have to make countless trips and that it would be dangerous to land so many times. Knowing that it is only a matter of time before other zombies find the hole, Alice decides that they must get out of there soon and suggests letting Chris go, causing a great debate among the survivors, but they have no choice and choose to listen to what he has to say. Finally free, the ex-military man sees Claire and approaches her saying he is her brother, but ends up being immobilized by the woman who has not yet recovered her memories. After explaining about her friend's condition, Alice calms Claire down and they all follow Chris to the garage next to the main entrance. There, Chris shows them the garage gate and tells them that behind it there is a 10-ton armored vehicle that can take them to the beach, but as the lock is jammed, they'll have to destroy it to get in. Observing the number of zombies in the main entrance, Luther comes to the conclusion that they'll need more weapons, and Chris tells him that while he was on duty, his platoon used the basement as a storage room planned for years of war. So, even if his comrades have taken a few, there must still be a lot of useful stuff in there. At that moment, the executioner finally arrives at the prison and starts hitting the entrance with such force that the whole building shakes. Knowing that it's only a matter of time before the giant Axeman manages to get inside, the survivors split up into several groups and Luther is in charge of trying to stop the creature, but even after several headshots, the monster is still standing. In an attempt to stop him, Luther and Claire push a car to block the way while Bennett and the others finally manage to get into the garage. Inside the prison, Chris and Alice go to the basement entrance and discover that the passage is completely flooded, so they will have to go down 2 floors underwater before they can reach the armory. With no other options, Alice hands the ex-serviceman a gun and together they enter the passage, using only a flashlight to guide them through the murky waters. After almost 2 minutes underwater, the pair finally reach the other side and light a flare to illuminate the corridors, but before they can locate the armory, they are surprised by a horde of zombies that come out of the water to attack them, forcing Alice to go through the skull of one of them with her sword while Chris shoots the others. Running low on ammunition, the pair decide to flee through the corridors until they find the weapons depot and fill their backpacks, but even though their mission is complete, they can't get back through the door and decide to escape through the ventilation ducts. In the garage, one of the survivors realizes that the armored vehicle has no engine and that in this condition it will take a week to get it working. But Bennett is not willing to wait that long and decides to eliminate his companion in cold blood, taking Kim along so that together they can steal Alice's plane. At that moment, the executioner finally breaks down the gate and thousands of zombies manage to invade the prison, forcing Luther and Claire to flee to the terrace. Hearing the sound of her plane, Alice also rushes to the top floor and tries to stop Bennett from stealing it, but the man is still armed and she has to take cover to avoid being shot. Realizing his former boss's madness, Kim refuses to get on the plane and just watches Bennett leave, taking with him the last chance they had to ask for help. But the zombies arrive on the terrace and they don't even have time to mourn. Now that they have plenty of weapons and ammunition, the survivors eliminate the zombies while retreating to the elevator. But since they have no electricity, Alice stays behind and throws a grenade that explodes the steel cables, causing the rest of the group to fall into the flooded pit. After the fall, Luther leads the group to the shower block, while Alice leaves a bomb on the ground and jumps from the terrace, causing some zombies to be destroyed by the explosion while others fall from the building trying to catch her. Downstairs, the woman continues shooting at the zombies until Luther appears to take her to the shower, but with hundreds of zombies and little ammunition, she throws the revolvers away and picks up her sawed-off shotguns, managing to blow the brains out of the brain-eaters and clearing the way. Together with Luther, the woman arrives at the shower room where everyone is debating what they should do, coming to the conclusion that the best option is to enter the tunnel until they reach the sewer and then the sea. With no other options, Chris and Luther offer to go ahead and clear the way, but while waiting to enter, the women are surprised by the executioner who splits Kim's body with a single blow from his axe. Used to her powers, Alice jumps on her rival and kicks him in the face, but she can't do any damage now that she has the strength of an ordinary person. While the mutant tries to hit her with his gigantic axe, Alice takes out her shotgun and aims it at the creature, but ends up being hit first and drops her weapons to the ground, leaving her completely defenseless. To help her friend, Claire manages to land a few more headshots on the executioner, but the executioner is so overpowered that it doesn't even tickle. With his axe, the radioactive monster runs after the girl trying to cut off her head and ends up breaking the water pipe, causing a large amount of liquid to gush out. Cornered, Claire runs towards the giant as if to confront him and at the last second slips under his legs, grabbing Alice's shotgun and using it to shoot the executioner in the head, knocking him out instantly. Thinking they've won, the women gather to celebrate when the cursed man uses his last strength to throw his giant axe in their direction. Because of their years of training, the two manage to dodge and strike back with more shots from the shotgun, blowing the executioner's skull off once and for all. After the battle, the two enter the tunnel and follow the path until they reach the other side, descending into the sewer one at a time, but when it's their turn, Luther ends up being captured by an unliving and a cave-in occurs, making it impossible for them to return to save him. When they reach the coast, the trio take a small boat and sail to the Arcadia, but to their surprise, they find the deck almost completely empty, except for the plane that Bennett destroyed. Checking the ship, they discover that for some reason the crew abandoned the vessel in a hurry, leaving the fuel and electricity working perfectly. Reading the logbook, Chris discovers that the crew threw all the boats overboard and fled 3 days ago, but for some reason, the accountant says that there are still 2,185 passengers on board. Curious, they decide to go to the lower compartments to look for people and find the umbrella symbol on one of the doors, revealing that Arcadia was just a trap to attract survivors. At that moment, the gate opens and they enter a large white room where the bodies of the passengers are waiting to undergo the experiments. Looking for a way to save them, Alice begins to walk around the place until she comes across a large trail of blood. Following the clue, she ends up in a room full of umbrella jets and immediately sees the same explosive that Wesker used in Japan, but decides to ignore it and move on. In the next room, the woman finds several bodies lying on stretchers and Wesker sitting on a throne next to his dogs. Alice points her shotgun in the direction of the zombie animals and ends up forgetting to check her back, which causes her to be surrendered by Bennett. Unable to react, the woman drops her weapons and asks Wesker what he wants, discovering that the T-virus is running through the villain's veins and enabled him to survive the accident, but as it is extremely powerful, the mutation is trying to take over his genetic code. Wanting to stabilize the virus, Wesker tried ingesting human DNA to correct the imbalance, but he didn't get the results he wanted with the blood of ordinary people, and now he wants to try Alice's, since she is the only person who was compatible with the T-virus. To avoid becoming zombie lunch, the woman throws some surgical tools at Wesker and kicks the gun out of Bennett's hands, throwing the traitor on top of one of the bizarre bodies. With the dogs preventing her from picking up her shotguns, Alice just stares at the villain until the Redfield siblings appear behind him. But because of his new abilities, Wesker can sense their presence and starts fighting them both at the same time, knocking Claire down while dodging Chris's shots. As soon as she gets up, the girl tries to get a gun to shoot Wesker and ends up being taken hostage, but manages to take advantage of the proximity to stick a knife in the villain's thigh without him realizing it. Virtually immune to pain, the Umbrella leader removes the blade from his leg and manages to keep the upper hand against both brothers at the same time. Even though they work together, they can't defeat the evil boss and end up trapped in the giant containers just like the other survivors. Alone, Alice dodges the bite of the first hooded dog and manages to pick up the shotgun from the ground, using it to tear the dog's body apart. When the second one advances towards her, She kicks a giant piece of glass that hits the Doberman and causes his body to split in two, but just when Alice thinks she can win, Bennett rises from the ashes and drives a giant blade into her arm. Wanting to eat his meal, Wesker sticks out his zombie tongue and approaches to devour her. However, the woman doesn't give up and removes the object from her wrist, sticking it in the middle of the villain's forehead. Extremely powerful, the man removes the blade from his brain as if it were nothing and again opens his mouth to devour her, but this time Alice takes it harder and shoots him with a shotgun, opening a hole in Wesker's head. After the victory, the woman manages to remove Chris and Claire from the capsules and the brothers unload their weapons into the villain's body, leaving Bennett trapped in the compartment to starve. After defeating Umbrella's greatest force, the trio returns to free the other survivors when they see one of the company's jets flying away. Knowing that Wesker is inside, they run away while the villain types in the code that will destroy the freighter, but to their surprise, Alice has already expected this and has placed the explosive inside the jet, causing the villain to explode into millions of pieces in the air. Now that it's finally over, Chris asks what they should do and Alice says she'll keep Arcadia's promise, broadcasting her own voice message to say that all survivors are welcome, but as soon as she finishes using the radio, dozens of new Umbrella jets appear around them and they'll have to deal with each one. So what did you think of this movie? Leave it in the comments below. And if you liked the video, like and subscribe for more movie recaps. See you next time.